Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest three-way VC video. And very glad to be here. And we're introducing Steve, otherwise known as Psych in the Valleys. And yeah, delighted to have him joining us this evening. I mean, I think the reason we like Steve so much is he's got such eclectic taste, really. He's one of the people who shows soundtracks and reggae and all kinds of stuff, really. So there's always something to get off. And also, most recently, old record players and old radios as well. So we've got a really diverse package here. So very pleased to have you here, Steve.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. This will be the first time I've watched, usually watching your videos, I usually have a little notepad making notes of the records you're showing. You're one of those, what I call those dangerous VC channels, which costs me money. The other one is John, the 6-inch pianist, and Alan Static Traveller. I have to ration what I watch.
That's right. It's a dangerous business, the VC.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kick off and show the first, just for anybody who might be watching for the first time, the idea is we all show about 7 records. We also talk about a book we've been reading that other people might be interested in, and then talk about a film or a TV series or something like that. That's the kind of lockdown menu, really, we've been working off. So I'm going to kick off with this, which is a record, looks incredibly psychedelic, but isn't that psychedelic actually. It's on John Zorn's Zadig label, and it's the band called The Dreamers. And it's got the record called Pelucida, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, John Zorn puts a lot of stuff out of his label, which is always incredibly well produced, beautifully mastered, but always comes out on CD. He doesn't do many records on vinyl. He's done about 3 or 4. And this is just kind of a classic, kind of beautiful production with incredibly, the records are just sound incredible, but it's also there's loads of spot varnish all over the cover. So it's got almost like a textured kind of relief map kind of cover to it as well. And I kind of wanted this when it came out, but it was so expensive with American postage. And all of a sudden one appeared on Amazon, mispriced, with only, £1.27 postage on it or something or other, which I then snapped up, and it came, shrink wrapped, brand new copy. And it was £17 instead of about the 40 or 50 quid it's been going for. And that sometimes happens, actually, mostly on Amazon, I have to say, so very pleased to have that. And the Dreamers are a great band with Jamie Saft, the keyboard player, Mark Rebo, the guitarist, Trevor Dunn on bass, Kenny Wollison on vibes, and Joey Barron on drums. So it's kind of like somewhere between, sounds almost like there's quite a strong Jewish kind of theme to it, but there's also kind of almost like elements of surf music in there. And we were just talking before we started filming about early instrumental music from the UK. There's a very strong kind of vibe of that going on in the music as well. And I know that was an influence on some of the players in that band. So yeah, Pelucida.
Nice.
Highly recommend it if you've got 50 quid to spend on it.
Yeah. Or a lucky Amazon. Lucky Amazon. That's the first one from the notebook. I have actually got a notebook here. Right. I'll show you. This is my first one, and as you said, I do show soundtracks, and I've been quite interested in my lockdown listening since last March. How things have gone. They've shifted towards the ambient, definitely, and the instrumental. But this is I always get his name wrong. It's Alessandro Alessandroni, who was a guy who worked with Morricone. And he was the guy who did a lot of the whistling on some of those classic Morricone Western tracks. And he also did the guitar, I think. I think he might have done the guitar on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But this is a wonderful album. And this is one of those sort of like blink and you miss it releases. I think they've only printed 300 or 500 of them. And it looks like, it's a nice reproduction. It's a nice heavyweight vinyl. And it's a lovely, lovely record. It's very, it gets put up there as being one of the best lounge records of all time. But I think sometimes people use that lounge sort of genre almost in a derogatory way. It goes a hell of a lot deeper than that. There's sort of elements of sort of like Latin and jazz in it as well. And his wife sings sort of scatty, sort of like light vocals over the top of quite a few of the tracks. So when I sit up here doing my work in the week, my son is opposite me doing his live lessons, and we've got records playing all the time. So he said, there's one I won't show you this time, but I've got a Morricone track which is driven around a bend over the last few weeks. I've been highly addicted to this sound. Yeah, this is a wonderful, wonderful record, and I think I did get it off Amazon actually. But yeah, well worth getting. There's a couple of others which have been reissued as well from around sort of like the early 70s, but they're extremely limited and very expensive. You're looking at about 40, 50 quid for the reissue, really. So, you know, well worth looking out for anyway. It's a good one.
Nice.
Great stuff. You can listen to it at so many different levels. Kind of, I mean, there's a lot of detail in that kind of, well, particularly Morricone's music, that you can kind of, so you can either listen to it as kind of almost as background music, but then you can dig in at the same time as well and hear all this stuff going on.
I've just had I've had about a 3 month Morricone phase. I've not been able to get out of them. Yeah, just unbelievable. Just can't stop listening to it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's been interesting. I've just having the time that we've had, which is basically in the last year. I have been definitely listening to more music and digging into the room where I spend an awful lot of my time here, and also being very aware of whose birthdays it is, and unfortunately who's been dying recently. And sadly, you know, this last week we lost Bunny Wailer, and yeah, this is Rock and Groove, which was his sort of almost a bit like a kind of comeback album in the early 80s, and it was the dancehall style was beginning to take over in Jamaican music, having kind of, you know, been in a deep roots period up till the end of the 70s. And Bunny came back with this, which just had 3 tracks on one side and 4 on the other, and it was him basically with the Roots Radix and also Sly and Robbie, just doing kind of, I mean, they were sort of a weird kind of roots dance hall hybrid, really. It wasn't kind of classic dance hall, but it was very much stuff that also sounded great on a 12-inch, and was a big hit, and on his own Solomonic record label. And yeah, just last week, I did, you know, one of the radio shows I did, I played half an hour of Bunny Wailer, digging right back to the early Wailers stuff from the 60s with the Studio One, Leslie Kong, Lee Perry, and right up to sort of, well, actually not, probably up to sort of late 80s. But he was a deeply spiritual guy, and brought, you know, just all three, him, Peter Tosh and Bob Marley, that combination was really a remarkable set of voices, you know, and you know, so influenced by the kind of impressions and the American kind of 60s vocal groups, and just interesting how it all flowered and they went off on their own different paths. But yeah, a sad loss. And I did actually get to see Bunny at I think it was the Brixton Academy, and there was only one gig that I can remember that had a similar vibe, which was singing Burning Spear at the Forum in Kentish Town. But there was a presence when Bunny came on the stage that was just something else. He was radiating something.
He was burning some incense and stuff, wasn't he, or something? He was. I mean, not what.
Were you at that gig, John?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I know.
We discovered we were at the same gigs before we knew each
other. But it had a very, very. It was kind of a heavy vibe in a really nice way. It was a really kind of warm.
Yeah.
I remember when Rock and Groove came out, it had this massive sound as well. A lot of reggae. One of the reasons I like reggae, it's quite kind of, in a way, quite tight sounding, but this had this huge kind of soundstage around it as well. Actually, love that record. Yeah.
Yeah, very sad news. He'd been ill for some time, and I think he'd been in hospital since last July.
I didn't know he'd had a stroke and he hadn't been able to speak for a year. I didn't know anything about that. He was only 72 or 73.
Yeah, very sad, very, very poignant moment. He passed away, and you're right about, you know, you read a lot about the influence of the impressions on those Jamaican vocal groups, and a lot of those early Jamaican sides are, you know, like Gypsy Woman and things like that. And you can really hear it, you know. And I think sometimes it's not like talked about enough, really. You know, I mean, I have very strong feelings on Curtis, and I'm reading Curtis Mayfield's biography at the moment, and he's quite a complex guy.
Is that the one by his son?
Yes.
Yeah, it's weird. It's an interesting book, isn't it?
But he just started.
Loads of stuff I had no idea about at all in it, actually. Yeah, he's quite a dark character in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, much darker than I'd kind of built up my picture of Mayfield. Curtis Mayfield was totally different, actually.
The same to me as well.
Yeah.
But I was going to show a bunny, but I won't do that.
You can show a bunny, John.
Well, I was going to show this one actually, which
came out almost through the post today.
Which came out almost at the same time.
Yeah.
Which was kind of, in a way, he made two. There's this album, also one called Tribute as well, which I've got, which came out after he'd started the new kind of style. But he went back and actually re-recorded a lot of Wailer songs, and they're great. I mean, this is a great sounding record, actually. I mean, it was produced by Bunny, but it sounds like it was a Sly and Robbie production, actually. It's got that real crispness to it as well. And in fact, he does a version of Keep On Moving, which is, of course, an impression song in here, which is done by the Wailers. And it's a great record, this one, actually. It's a really, really nice. The second one, which was called Tribute, is not quite as good, but this one's terrific, actually. And it's got versions of, as well as songs he wrote for the Wailers, he also does a version of Burial, which was a Peter Tosh song, and I think he does it better than Peter Tosh does it. So yeah, definitely miss Bunny. Very sad loss.
Yeah. Do you want to show another one, or should I?
You're on now, Steve.
Okay, right. Kind of links nicely, really. This is I don't know, the colour isn't great on this. This is a Keith Hudson record. Some of Keith Hudson's early productions. It's got Riot on it. It's got U-Roy toasting on top on the tracks as well. But this is a wonderful record, and this is a tenner at the moment. You can get it on Amazon for a tenner.
Really?
And it's it was reissued only a couple of years ago. And Keith Hudson is my sort of introduction to Keith Hudson was Blood and Fire's Pick a Dove. When they reissued that, I got that, and it totally transfixed me. I just never heard anything like it. It's just a beautiful set of music. And some of this stuff is on the Studio Kind of Cloudy, the Trojan issue, the Keith Hudson stuff. But this is his early stuff, and it's just so addictive. And there's some greatness. There he is on the back. There's a good story. This is his stare that he'd often give to women in Jamaica, and they couldn't resist him, apparently. And it's got one of his friends on the sleeve notes is saying, "I tried that stare and didn't get the same impact, Keith." But of course, he was a multi-talented man. And I don't know what it is about Keith Hudson and his rhythms and so on, but they're just so quirky. But they really hit the soul. And actually, it's a nice for a tenor. It's a lovely reissue. It's got a track by track guide in there. I mean, there's a U-Roy one on there. Where is it? It's a Tribal War. That's a brilliant. You've got to listen to that one. It's fantastic. And also, it's got a tie on here, which is I don't know if you know the I-Roy one. Hot Stuff. That rhythm. That's well worth listening to. And it says on here that it's called Tie after Keith Hudson's 7-year-old son. And Tie was Keith's favourite brand of marijuana, and he named his son after it. But it's well worth getting. And what I really like on this, actually, it kind of Keith Hudson called himself a soul communicator, okay, rather than a record producer. It says on here his command of the English language wasn't great, and he was always looking in words in a thesaurus to try and find out how he could articulate himself better. But he called himself a soul communicator, and that's what this guy is. And he went on with other records I like by him, The Blood My Blood, Torch of Freedom, all of those records. I nearly chose. I might as well show it while I'm here, won't I? If you can see it there.
Yeah.
Rasta Communication.
Yes,
all that stuff, just awesome. But I thought I'd show this one because it's not one that's talked about very much, and it's his first one, and it's well worth digging out. I could go on all night about Keith Hudson, so I'll stop there.
He has such a distinctive sound, doesn't he? He doesn't sound like anybody else.
No, he's totally out on his own. I love this voice. I know people don't, and when journalists write about Keith Hudson, all they do is talk about his voice to begin with, But if you hear, on Rasta Communication, if you hear, is it My Eyes Are Red, Bloody Eyes, that one, and also on Torch of Freedom, that first track, I Lost All Sense of Direction. It's so poignant. It gets me every time. Well, just great stuff.
Well, there's 2 tracks on Flesh of My Flesh as well, which haven't got any drums on, which is quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
For a record not having any drum. And they still sound absolutely fantastic, I think.
That was a record that was so hard to get. I can remember in about 1998, emailed Steve Barrow, the Blood and Fire label owner at the time, and he was ever so nice. He emailed me back and he goes, "You've got no chance of getting that."
Yeah.
You know, and then it got released, didn't it? I think Honest John's put it out as well at one point. It's been released a number of times.
Yeah, they did it with Basic Channel, didn't they? That German label. Yeah.
Well, the next record I'm going to share is extremely unrare, but you know, it's not just about sharing rare records. This is a record that I remember was very influential when I got it. I just bought a new copy actually because my original copy is so beaten up. This is Earth, Wind and Fire. What is this album called? Is it? I don't remember what it's called. What is it called?
Isn't it All in All?
All in All. Yeah, it's All in All. That's the one. And the sound of this, I just remember as a teenager, I'd never heard anything that sounded as amazing actually as this record. It's just so beautifully produced and so musical and really varied, and you know, sounds of kind of kalimbas and marimbas and jazzy and Latiny and funky and ballady. And it was at a time when, you know, I hadn't settled on my genre. I still haven't actually, but there was a temptation as a teenager to be into a particular thing. But when I heard this, I just thought, this is incredible. And it's still sounding great today. And every track's a winner. So yeah, if you don't have All in All, pick it up very cheaply, secondhand.
Yeah, that's one for me to get, definitely. Yeah, I know John, the 6-inch pianist, talks about when I met them all it was over a year ago now. We met up in Bristol, and met quite a few of the guys off the VC, and he's talking. He's so great and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good. Yeah.
So really, it was before they went really sort of super commercial.
Yeah.
Come up from this kind of quite experimental, more jazzy sort of bass, but it kind of crystallized with that album, and it's really nice.
Well, I think everybody wanted to sound like them as well, didn't they? I mean, they were the band. I think them and probably Parliament Funkadelic were the two bands that everybody wanted to sound like, I think, for quite a long time. So I've got something very unrare as well.
Oh, Jim Capaldi.
Yeah, which has just been reissued, I noticed, actually. So it prompted me to get this out, and I sounded great, actually, I have to say. This was his, I think, third solo album, or fourth solo album. And I was telling Mark just before we started, actually, that about how we were both missing digging. And I remember picking up all of the Jim Capaldi albums for 50 pence, basically, all together, the whole lot. And the other 50 pence was all of the Bootsy Collins records. Wow. But this is a great record, actually, this one. This has got, a lot of it is Steve Winwood playing with him, actually. So a lot of the tracks have. And there's a fantastic track with Paul Kossoff as well, the guitarist, called Boy With a Problem, which I think might be about Paul Kossoff somehow or other. But they're all kind of interesting. They're not all great, actually, the Jim Capaldi albums, but he's a really good songwriter.
I think that's the best one, isn't it?
Yeah. I think
the one I don't have, of course.
I think his voice is not as strong as you kind of almost want to hear Steve Winwood singing some of the songs, actually. But this is, I think, the best one of the lot. Half of it's recorded in Muscle Shoals and half of it's recorded in London. So it's got the usual kind of mixture of traffic-related people and also Muscle Shoals people. Yeah, but I remember so this probably cost me 5 pence or something. Right on this original.
It's interesting about missing digging and going looking for records. I think I've only been in one record shop since last March because the restrictions in Wales were much stricter than England. We opened up a lot more slowly. And there's a couple. I mean, it's much different here, to where I used to live in terms of being able to source records. It's more of a battle. But there's a lovely record shop in Hay-on-Wye called Haystacks, which is and there's one down in Abergavenny as well. And then of course I would then go down to Cardiff for my record shopping. But it's I'm really missing just the unexpected, really, and what's going to pop up. And
exactly, stuff that you weren't looking for. Oh, what's this like? Exactly. Yeah.
I had something pushed through the door of Honest John's. Actually, that's the only record. It's the closest I've been to a record shop.
Yeah. I went in when the school broke up last July. I went to Hay-on-Wye, and I had to wear a face mask, and I was in there for nearly an hour. But it felt so weird, it's just really sad. Fingers crossed the record shop survived,
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Another soundtrack for me then, and this is there's a lot of glare on this actually. It's still in the shrink. This one. This is Morricone's Sonny and Jed, and oh, what a wonderful soundtrack. This is there was a label. It was this is the Ennio Morricone Film Score Society, which is an American organization which released like half the soundtrack on one side, then one on the flip as well. So it's the Cannibals on the other side, which I've not actually listened to. And the reason for that is because the Sonny and Jed is just a spellbinding soundtrack. It's just gorgeous. It starts off with a little sort of minute and a half little acoustic number. It reminds me a little bit of Clint Eastwood's The Unforgiven, that beautiful acoustic sort of theme in that. Then it goes a bit crazy, as you would expect Morricone. You can't resist it. But the one on here which I love is called Sweet Susan, and it is just, it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful piece of music. It's just so worth trying to find. And you can pick this one up pretty cheap because nobody cares about it. You know, nobody cares about this one at all. But I've never seen the movie. It's got Telly Savalas and Susan George in it. I think there she is there. But yeah, it's just it's great. I think it's only got, there must be more than 5 tracks on it, you know. But it's just 5 on this record. And I just adore it. It's fantastic. Well worth getting.
I think I had a massive crush on Susan George when I was a teenager.
I think I got a crush on Morricone at the moment.
What should we go with next? I'm going to share a 12-inch actually. This is David McAlmont, but it's a track with Lewis Taylor on backing vocals called Slinky that I'd never heard before until about 3 weeks ago. And anyone who watches this channel knows that John and I are huge Lewis Taylor fans. And I have to say, Be With Records are about to release his first album on vinyl, which goes for about £100 currently. And you were saying, John, it's not even a great
sounded absolutely terrible.
Yeah, but it's coming out. So that's a bit of a news flash there for anyone who doesn't know.
Notice we both got liked by Be With today.
Sorry?
Notice we both got liked on Instagram by Be With today.
Oh, right. Well, there you go. This is just a beautiful, beautiful piece of music, incredibly evocative and very sexy piece of music, Slinky, with Lewis Taylor's backing vocals and David McAlmont virtually sounding as though the mic is inside his mouth. He's so close to it. Really, really nice. And yeah, just a 12-inch that you can pick up. And what's the Love My Faith, Lose My Faith is actually the sort of A side. So I think Slinky is just like a knockoff B side, but as often happens on 12 inches, the excitement is on the B side.
Definitely. And yeah, the reissue on double vinyl, the first one will be great.
Of the Lewis Taylor, yeah. That is going to sound great.
It's a problem with the single vinyl. There was no bass on it at all, basically. It sounded really weird.
Do you have that album, Steve?
No, I don't. I've never heard any Lewis Taylor ever.
You're in for such a treat.
Yeah.
You really are.
I will get it. I will definitely get it. Yeah.
You can imagine all the musical genres you like condensed into one person.
Oh wow!
And still sounding interesting. That's
and doesn't sound like really anybody else.
No. Yeah, completely.
And Lewis Taylor. What's the name of the record?
It's just called Lewis Taylor, I think.
So this is something that completely missed. Actually, this is Jason Moran, who's the American pianist, jazz pianist. And I got quite a few of his records, but this one came out in 2014, and I never ever noticed it at all. It's actually a tribute to Fats Waller, and so these are versions of Fats Waller tunes. And it's produced by Don Was and Michel Ndegeocello, who play on the record as well, and all engineered by somebody called Bob Power, who's behind some of the best-sounding records ever, really, D'Angelo and Erykah Badu and all kinds of people. It sounds fantastic. Actually, it's very difficult to describe. Actually, I mean, it's got a very, very strong hip hop vibe. But you've got songs like Honeysuckle Rose and Jitterbug Waltz and all these kind of tunes on there as well, and it really works. Actually, great, absolutely fantastic playing on it from all concerned, and it's just a really great listen as a record. Actually, so I'm very glad to find this. Actually, I must admit.
Was it pricey, John?
No, not at all. kind of 15 quid or something rather, I think. Actually didn't cost much at all.
Mm.
But it's got a great sound. It's got a really punch. I mean, Bob Power gets the most amazing sound out of his records. It's got a really kind of punchy kind of sound to it as well.
Mm.
And Michelle's a fantastic producer. I mean, I think that's one side of her work that people just underestimate, really. She produces great records as well as making great records herself. Do you know Michelle and Deggy cello?
I don't know.
Another one. I think probably her and Lewis Taylor are two people we bang on about to everybody, really. I think we're not on commission from either of them.
I tend to with my, because I have such limited time at the moment, I tend to watch the channels on the VC of stuff which I don't know much about. Or I find that's one of the best things about the VC for me, is being introduced to a lot of new music.
Absolutely.
Because it gets difficult. I think you start looking for new sounds, and you need recommendations sometimes, I think. And there's a couple already today. That's great. Yeah. Right. You know what you're going to get from me. It's probably going to be another reggae one. But this is one which I've been spinning a lot recently. I think I did show it 2 or 3 years ago. And this is Glen Brown's rhythms with King Tubby, Termination Dub, and this is on the Blood and Fire label. I was quite lucky in a way, I suppose, in the 90s. I used to do most of my record shopping down in Bristol. Used to go up Park Street, a couple of record shops up there, and I always used to buy the Blood and Fire LPs as they came in, and it was like my education, really. It's such a great time to really get into reggae, because they're releasing some fantastic stuff that had been out of print for a long time. And this is another one of those producers who, an artist in his own right, who is just a little bit quirky, just a bit odd, really. So his sound is strange. And highly addictive listening. I mean, he released a lot of stuff on his pantomime label. And what he would do, I was just reading about it earlier, is he would take his rhythms to Tubby's studios, and Tubby would mix 6 or 7 different versions of it. And then Glen Brown would come back and pick the best one. And this is heavy stuff, really. Now, there's another record I got, Lamb's Bread, Silford Walker, I think it is, which is a great record, which again can be picked up on reissue really cheaply. And it's just I want to get more of Glen Brown's stuff. That's something I've been looking into and trying to find out a little bit more about, really. He reminds me a little bit of Keith Hudson in that his rhythms are quite quirky and they go off in unexpected directions and they're quite strange. But yeah, this is a really nice record. I think this is the 15th Blood and Fire issue, something like that. And I think when Blood and Fire collapsed, I think there was another Glen Brown one in the pipeline, and it came out on another label, like Hot Potato or something like that. I know Steve Barrow did the sleeve notes on it, and it's got kind of the same kind of graphics and stuff like that. But it's a badly missed label, Blood and Fire. I wish it was still around. I really do.
They're great. I mean, somebody told me, I can't remember who it was, a couple of weeks ago, that Steve Barrow knows as much about hard bop as he does about reggae, which is absolutely frightening. Actually,
I read about
other forms of music as well. Kind of really.
Yeah, I read an interview, an old interview with him, and he was talking about Blood and Fire and the problems that they ran into and so on. But he was saying that he had dug out, I think it was actually on the Blood and Fire Facebook group, he'd dug out some of his old flyers from stuff in the late 60s that he'd been to. He'd been to some festival in Belgium, Coltrane playing, and Nina Simone was on the same bill and things like that. So he was a big jazz fan, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Next up, this is in honor of the Welsh connection. This is Christmas at the Patty. This is a live recording from Man's Christmas Party at the Patty Pavilion in Swansea, December 19th, 1972, on a double 10-inch. And this is the Welsh band Man. I don't know if you know Man at all, Steve.
Yeah. They get talked about around here. They weren't far from here. And they Merthyr based down that way, so.
I'm not entirely sure, but there was many kind of different lineups and different kind of spin-offs and offshoots, but they definitely felt like a family. And I sort of discovered them in the 70s, and they had a very, they had their own sound. They were kind of inspired by kind of Quicksilver Messenger Service and the kind of West Coast scene, but they also had a distinctly UK and probably Welsh sound, whatever a Welsh sound is, but they really grooved it. And they had this kind of twin guitar lineup of Deke Leonard and Terry Jones. And there's a track on here which is called Eddie Waring, actually, interestingly enough, after the rugby commentator. It was probably just a jam. They would kind of, at their best, they were just jamming. And they had this amazing drummer called Terry Williams, who a really sensational drummer who ended up playing a lot with Dave Edmunds, but just a really strong rhythm section and kind of a funky kind of psych rock vibe would be happening. And yeah, there's all kinds of different, there's Ducks Deluxe, there's Help Yourself, the Jets, Man, various people playing with various people. It just sounds like they were having an absolute ball and the audience were loving it. But yeah, this is just it's a great double 10-inch.
It's slightly weird. They had almost had a residency down the road from where I lived, considering what I didn't live anywhere near Wales at all. And they used to play once a month at a place called the Railway Hotel in North London. They used to come and play.
Oh, really?
Almost for a whole year. I mean, I saw them about 4 or 5 times there, I think, actually. Yeah. And they were great. Also, I remember, I think you were at the same gig as well when they came over with John Cipollina as well from.
Yeah. Well, they were just the band who toured all the time.
Yeah, completely. They just played all the time.
And if you play all the time, you get really good, you know, and you get really good live as well.
Yeah.
I do see when I go when I go around the charity shops and they'll be back open again, you do see sort of like a lot of Welsh language 7-inch EPs floating around. And I always pick those up, and you often see Meek Stevens on them, the guy who did the Outlander album, like that kind of like classic acid folk album.
Okay.
So I've picked up a few EPs last year with him playing acoustic on them and stuff like that. And but you don't tend to see too much, you know. The stuff you tend to see just mainly sort of male voice choirs around here. You see a lot of LPs of that, like the Treorchy male voice choir have their own, you know, limited edition run of LPs and stuff like that. I've been to Solva down near St David's, where Mike Stevens come from, and that's a beautiful little village. It's a little harbour there and a couple of pubs. And I did go around the antique shops there in the hope I'd find a couple of original LPs, but no.
I worked with somebody who came from Swansea, and he proudly said he'd never been to Cardiff, which I thought was quite some. But I think there's quite a lot of competition between Swansea and Cardiff.
There is. I mean, one thing. I mean, I've lived in Wales now since 2009, and the thing that really strikes me where I work is that in the valleys there's a really strong identity in each valley. So you're either from the Rhondda or you're from the Cynnon Valley or whatever, and that's something I'd never come across sort of before. Growing up in Wiltshire, you just didn't kind of have that kind of like. And I talk about the kids almost like this geographical belonging. Like you're in a geographical landform. You're in a valley, and that's where you mainly stay. You know, it's an incredible part of the world to work in and to live in. Yeah.
Okay, my next record is not an obscure record at all. It's Bob Dylan's "Time Out of Mind," and I hadn't listened to this for quite a long time actually, and it just sonically sounded amazing. Actually, still, I mean, it's a Daniel Lanois production. I don't think Bob himself liked it that much actually, but it sounds incredible. I mean, the kind of soundstage is just, I mean, he does get an amazing sound on his records, Lanois. I mean, most of it's just recorded live in the studio, but he uses incredible, interesting vintage mics and all kinds of stuff like that. And there's some great songs on this record. I mean, Not Dark Yet and Highlands and all these kind of tracks. Yeah. So I've been having a bit of a Bob phase. I think he is rapidly approaching 80, so I think that maybe it's about his birthday coming as well. I've been listening to the last album a hell of a lot as well, but this one sounded really good when I played it last night actually.
Yeah, I mean, I've got his most recent album, and I've played it a lot as well. You know, it is an incredible record, and the record just shown. When it came out, hadn't he been very poorly as well? I think he had a heart condition, didn't he? And I think he'd got it. He said, didn't he catch it from somewhere down Louisiana or something like that? He got some kind of
weird infection. Yeah.
But yeah, Not Dark Yet is that's an incredible song. It really is. But it had nothing to do with his lung condition or nothing, did it? I think it's just coincidence. But yeah, wonderful record. Yeah. Right. Welsh Connection then is Stan Tracey Quartet Jazz Suite. Okay, and it's a record I was looking for a long time. I'd seen lots of battered copies and absolutely ridiculously priced copies of this record, but I managed to get it a few weeks ago for a really reasonable price. It's just one of those British jazz classics. I don't think it's ever been reissued properly on vinyl. Certainly with this cover, I know there's been some issues, and I think he re-recorded it as well at one point. But it's just a stunning piece. It's just a stunning piece. This now, whenever we go, we've not been down to the beach since last year, but my wife loves going to the beach, and we drive out through Brecon, through Senny Bridge out to Carmarthen, and you get to the other side, and of course you've got Dylan Thomas's boathouse. We always say we're going to go there, but we never do. or we'd really like to visit there, but we never get there. But I only really got into British jazz when the BBC4 documentary Jazz Britannia came out, and they started showing you Don Rendell and Stan Tracey and so on. I was lucky enough to see Stan play at the Brecon Jazz Festival, and sadly the Brecon Jazz Festival is pretty much gone now. It's not what it was. But one track from here would be the Starless and Bible Black. I just I listened to it just before I came on actually, and it's just a wonderful piece of music. Very atmospheric, very evocative, and there's been such a run of British jazz reissues over the last 2 or 3 years, especially with Don Rendell stuff. But it's just I'd like to see this one get a decent reissue so more people could hear it. Yeah, it's a great one, really good.
I used to run a record shop and distribution thing. We used to distribute Stan's label, Steam, as well. There's a lot of good stuff on his label. He was like the kind of British Monk, really, actually.
Yes.
He never gets the kind of credit. I mean, I know a lot of Americans who heard him play when he was in the house band at Ronnie's. Just thought he was incredible. Just thought he was fantastic. People saying why isn't he a national hero? Basically, Stan plays so well.
Yeah, I think there was the famous quote from Sonny Rollins about it, wasn't there? Yeah. Do you realise how good this guy is? Yeah, wonderful.
Coming up next, this we go on about this sometime. I guess it was about April last year. I got this big batch of records from Stavros the Spinning Greek, and it was not called VCLT, but it was really, with the idea that John and I were going to meet up and split the spoils. And of course, we haven't seen each other since February, I don't think. Or we certainly haven't done a session together in the same room. Anyway, this was one of the ones I was hanging on to, thinking John was definitely going to get this. And then I just thought, I've got to listen to this. And it's Tedeschi Trucks Band, and the album is called Revelator. And Derek Trucks is the guitarist, who is just absolutely phenomenal player.
Amazing player.
He just is so bereft of cliche, and every solo just has so much feeling and passion in it. It's really quite something. And they've also got the amazing bass player. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Is it Otail Burbridge?
Otail Burbridge, yeah.
Who is phenomenal. And what's the
his brother's on it as well, Kofi.
That's right.
Keyboards, yeah.
And I guess there is a strong kind of jam band feel to these guys. They're like a very sort of funky version of the Allman Brothers, I suppose, in a way. And Otail Burbridge was playing with the Allman Brothers. But yeah, I've just been really delighted actually with this album. It's absolutely fantastic. And there's some wonderful just kind of groove tracks on it as well. So thank you so much, Stavros.
They're a classic example of they play, when they were playing probably 150, 200 gigs a year, basically.
Yeah.
They're just on the road, and they just got so good, actually. I felt last night, until about 3 a.m, I was watching YouTube videos of Tedeschi Trucks, because they're kind of addictive. And she's such a great singer as well.
What's her name?
Susan Tedeschi.
Susan Tedeschi.
And she played, in fact, a lot of the guitar playing on the album is her. It's not actually.
Oh, really?
It's not actually. Yeah, she's got a great style. Her style is very much more like, it's almost like a kind of Robbie Robertson, Curtis Mayfield, Pop Staples kind of style. So also there's 3 or 4 tracks on that album where she takes the first solo, actually. And she's a great player as well. But he's phenomenal. There's an amazing video with him playing with B.B. King. And B.B. King stops after his solo and just says, "That's the best guitar playing I've ever heard." Which is an amazing kind of compliment, really.
Yeah, I mean, he really is a special player. It's just so natural.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it me?
It is you, John.
Oh God. Okay. Right. Well, somebody who's 80 today. Happy birthday, Peter Brötzmann, who's the German saxophone player, kind of free jazz classic player. And this is from one of his first records called Nipples, unsurprisingly, as it says on. So I'll probably get the video taken down, actually. This was an album he made, which has got a great cover with a kind of fold out postcard cover on the front of it. And it featured a lot of the kind of Evan Parker without a beard, interestingly enough, who lives in the same town as Mark, Derek Bailey, Han Bennick and so forth. It was one of the very early kind of free jazz records, actually. And yeah, this is a very extremely rare record, actually, now, the original copy of this. But yeah, so happy birthday, Peter Brötzmann. I mean, he's still playing incredibly well at 80, actually, and kind of has almost got a whole new life. His latest kind of duo is him working with an American pedal steel guitarist in a duo. Kind of very interesting kind of model. But he's always curious. Actually, he always looked very scary, Peter Brötzmann, but he's actually a very sweet man. And a regular whenever he comes to London, playing at Cafe Oto as well.
I should mention BJ Cole is one of the stars of that Live at the Patty 10-inch. Great steel guitar player.
Yeah, I had a record. I think I showed it. Have I got it anywhere or not? Oh yes, this one here. Yeah, he plays on this one. Bored Civilians. BJ Cole's on that. Yeah. That's a record I'm still getting into. It's a deep record, that one. Right, this one I'm going to play because it's became a bit of a lockdown thing now. I got like a free CD on, I think it was Uncut magazine or something. I saw it, and it was a sample of Light in the Attic records, and this was one. And it was a sampler which I played continually in the car driving over to Brecon Beacons on the way to work. And there's some beautiful sort of ambient pieces on there. And then there was this guy here, and that's Shin Joong-hyun, the South Korean psychedelic guitarist, and it's a really lovely compilation of his stuff, going from like the 60s to the early 70s. You can see gatefold there, but there's one song on here which carried me through that first lockdown, and it's Beautiful Rivers and Mountains. And it's just, I don't, like I say, we were saying before we came on, I don't show much Psych, but it's a lovely psychedelic song, that is. So beautiful Rivers and Mountains, and a fascinating backstory. Government hated him. I think he ended up in prison for a while as well. He was locked away, but he came back again. It's just incredible, and you can see how he looks on the front there, and you can see it. That's kind of the face you pull in a car when you're driving when he starts playing that song.
Wow.
It's just incredible music. It's great. In fact, that track dominates his compilation so much. It's the one I always put on because it goes on for quite a long time. It's just incredible. So yeah, well worth giving that a listen.
What should we do next? I think we'll go here. So this is an album that came out, I think it was on Blue Note. Yeah, it was in the late 80s, 1988, Ralph Peterson Quintet. And again, Ralph Peterson sadly died, a great drummer. I think this was the only album that he did under his own name. And it's got Jerry Allen on piano and Steve Wilson on alto, Phil Bowler on bass, and Terence Blanchard, of course, on trumpet. And really great sounding record, this. One of those, a Blue Note album that you can pick up really cheaply. So a proper cheap heat. Oh, what's Steve got there?
No, I was going to...
It was a kind of unfashionable time of Blue Note.
Yeah, very unfashionable time, but great playing. And I just think that particular sound that was going on with those guys is really worth revisiting. I felt it's actually quite groundbreaking. And
his bands were, he was almost like a kind of latter-day Art Blakey, because his bands have a lot of the young players. He put about 4 or 5 records out under called the Fotet, F-O-T-E-T. And a lot of the younger players went through his band as well. Yeah.
I particularly liked Soweto 6, but it's all great actually, and definitely worth picking up if you find.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be on my list. That one definitely. And it's nice to hear the phrase "a cheap Blue Note record" as well.
Well, I was going to show this, but I won't because you've just shown it.
Oh, really? So you've already got that, John?
I've already got that. No, I got it at Christmas, actually. I
Ah.
meant to say to you, why didn't you listen to it? Because you can keep that one now.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, great.
So anyway, somebody else we've lost, actually, since we've done a video is Chick Corea, of course.
That's true.
And this is a kind of very much a kind of unknown, not an unknown, but a kind of untalked about kind of Chick Corea record. It's got such an awful cover, actually. It's My Spanish Heart, which is a great Spanish themed, obviously, record with the usual suspects, Steve Gadd, Joe Farrell, Stanley Clarke on it. But we've got some beautiful music on it, actually, and really interesting arrangements for large ensembles. There's some string orchestras on a couple of tracks, and it really works, actually. I mean, it's a kind of I mean, not every single track's a killer on it, but it's a double album. It's a sit down and listen to double album. It really, really works, actually, and also it's quite easy to find and pick up now.
Really putting Manuel from Fawlty Towers kind of look, though.
It does look a bit like it. And well, a lot of his records around this time were awful. There's another one which had like Smurfs.
What's the back?
But
that's after a lockdown, I think.
Yes.
Forgotten
how to dress. That's right. But
the last record I bought from Record Shop was a Chick Corea record. Yeah, the last one I bought. Yeah.
Actually, the last one I bought from a record shop was Crystal Silence with Gary Burton, which was a Chick Corea record. Yeah.
Right. I was kind of rooting around down there because I was thinking which one should I show. I found it hard to keep it to 7. There's so many records I want to chat with you guys about. But I'm gonna go back to my kind of lockdown feel, and this one made me laugh actually. This is Virginia Astley's From Gardens Where We Feel Secure, which goes for silly money now. I didn't pay silly money. I think I paid 20 quid for this, which was all I was going to pay. But it's kind of that sort of like, it came out I think about early 80s, 82, 83. I think EP came out before it. But it's a very sort of pastoral, sort of rural sounding record, and you've got like sheep in it, and there's owls hooting, a beautiful piano with some vocals from her briefly in it, but mainly instrumental. And it's kind of, I listened, the first time I ever heard this record, I was taking a group of 30 kids to Italy, and we were going on the Sunday night. And on the Saturday morning, I came down with a fever. And I was thinking, oh my God, am I going to get through? Am I going to get on the coach and stuff like that? And I remember it was a Saturday night, and it was hot. It was at the end of June, and I was kind of just reading. I was reading a book about this kind of music and that sort of like that I forgot what it's called now. Something haunted something. I don't know. I can't remember. But they talked about this record a lot. So I listened to it on YouTube, and it kind of calmed my fever went when I listened to it.
Wow.
So this has got healing properties, this record, yeah. But what made me laugh about this record is it's basically a summer's day. That's the theme, and it goes from the morning through to the evening. And where I was living at the other side of Brecon, right on the edge of the countryside. Well, I'm on the edge of the countryside now, but when the record finished, it felt like it was carrying on, because I could still hear sheep outside and I could hear an owl hooting. It's just really quite a weird thing to go through. But yeah, it's a lovely record, this, and it's getting more and more talked about. It was reissued on CD a few years ago, but those go for silly money as well. But it's just a nice, reflective piece of music. Really.
What's the name of the artist again, Steve?
It's Virginia Astley.
Okay, Virginia Astley.
I don't know if you can really see it. The light's not great in this attic, but yeah, From Gardens Where We Feel Secure.
Nice.
I had it on yesterday, but my son didn't like it. He told me to turn it off.
There's a nice joke. Joe Henry, the American artist, the producer of people, but Michelle and all kinds of other people like that. But he made a great record where they in the studio, and it wasn't in the country. It was actually not in a kind of busy city, but in the city, and they left all the doors of the studio open while they were recording the record, so you can hear. The music's great, but in the background you can occasionally hear people having an argument on the pavement outside, and it works beautifully. Actually, it really is. It's almost like a kind of, you don't expect people to have a kind of that kind of approach in the city, but it's a really beautiful record actually.
There's another artist, Sharon Krause, who's recorded near here. Actually, she was she kind of was influenced by that record, and she's a folk artist. She released a few beautiful records, and one of those was I've not got a copy. I've just heard it, but it's almost like a field recording, you know. And yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, just perfect for these times when you need that kind of music.
Well, this next record is not exactly a rare record. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with Caravan, In the Land of Grey and Pink, but it also has a very pastoral sound and a weird connection for me personally, because I live in Kent, in Faversham, just down the road from Canterbury, where a lot of these guys all went to school. But the album was actually recorded at Decca in Broadhurst Gardens in West Hampstead. Actually, when I was living also around the corner, about 5 minutes walk, I used to go past the Decca recording studio on my way to catch the 28 bus every morning before going to school. And yeah, I've only picked this up a few weeks ago, so I'm a bit late to the party. But they're very much a legendary band from around here, and their drummer, I can't remember what his name is, but he, Richard Coughlin, ran at the local pub for many years when I was living in Faversham. And I went to this weird festival at this place called Mount Ephraim, I think in the second year that I moved down. And it was just full of sort of late 60s, early 70s prog bands, but who were all quite seasoned. There was Arthur Brown and Man and Caravan, Colosseum. Yeah, so a great album. If you don't know this album, I think this is possibly their best album.
Definitely their best, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a record which is going up in price as well. I used to be able to pick that one up relatively easily.
Right.
I've noticed recently it's really beginning to pick up some prices, yeah, which is a shame when you want to. I've got it on CD.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
we're on to books.
Books, John.
Yeah. So weirdly enough, started reading this before Chick Corea died, but this is by the guy who wrote the really good book on Mawandishi that came out, Herbie Hancock's band. And this is looking at the lost Miles Davis Quintet, which was the one with Chick. It was recorded called Lost, because they hardly recorded any records, official records. And it's the one with Chick Corea and Dave Holland and Jack DeJohnette. But also hooks that up with people like Circle and the Revolutionary Ensemble and all kinds of it. It's just a really well-written book, actually. Really interesting, kind of good musical analysis, which is not incredibly kind of advanced, but really interesting stuff. Yeah, and he's a good writer. The Mawandishi book's really, really good as well, actually. And it came out a couple of years ago, I think, actually. So Chicago University Press. And it's called The Miles Davis Lost Quintet and Other Revolutionary Ensembles.
Nice.
Argues that they were really much more important than they were ever given credit for, that particular group.
Right. Well, I'm reading the Curtis book at the moment. I'm also reading the Chris Hillman autobiography at the moment, which is quite interesting. It starts with a fire. His neighbourhood burns down. But it's not the book which I keep picking up at the moment. It's just the one I keep reading. I don't see it. Brewers, Rogues, Villains, and Eccentrics. And it's like a reference guide of all the rogues, villains, and eccentrics who have ever frequented the British Isles. And it's lovely. It's great. You can pick this up for a £5. It's massive. But it's literally like a little reference guide. So you just find the name of somebody, and then it then sends you on to somebody else. It's got everybody in it. It's got like Jeffrey Archer in here. It's got Blackbeard the pirate. It's got pretty much every gangster who ever strolled the streets of London. It's just great, this is. And it's highly addictive. Lady Emma Hamilton, and so on and so on. But it's just great, and it just takes you through. And I was thinking when I was reading this, how many more rogues are going to be in this after what we've been through in the last year? You know, if it's going to need a new edition. But yeah, it's right. It's a funny book. It's quite sad and poignant in places, but it's just kind of, you know, when you're knackered, if I've been teaching online all day, I'm absolutely bug-eyed, and I just read a few of these, and off to sleep I go, dreaming of pirates and gangsters.
Nice.
They'll have a special edition just for people who've got dodgy PPE contracts.
Yeah.
This is another philosophy book, I guess, really. It's Chinese Thought, From Confucius to Cook Ding, by somebody whose name I don't think I can possibly pronounce, Roel Sturks, Sterckx. And my daughters gave this to me for Christmas. because one of the things I've been doing during lockdown is attending a regular Chinese philosophy class, and just, you know, finding it fascinating, discovering about kind of Confucius and the Moists and Taoism and stuff. And again, this is a, you know, not a page turner, but just a really interesting book to ponder on and to reflect on. You know, China's an amazing place and has such a fascinating story that we don't often, you know, we're not really very connected to it, but a lot to learn, and a lot of deep knowledge and wisdom contained within it. And the sort of book where, you know, there's a lot to sort of absorb and appreciate in a chapter, and I seem to go happily off to sleep after a chapter of that. Shall I say about what I've been watching, John?
Yeah, let's do the films.
Well, we are, because I've got my daughter who is back after finishing university and has been living with us ever since March. We're re-watching stuff that she never watched the first time. So we've watched the entire series, 5 series of Line of Duty, and we're just kicking into series 2 of Broadchurch. But I also, John, you're maybe about to talk about Can't Get You Out of My Head, but I'm on episode 2 of that, which is sensational.
Yeah, I'm about to watch we're going to watch the last one tonight, I think, actually.
Is there 6?
6, yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Sorry?
I'm just asking Steve if he's familiar with that.
No, I haven't seen it, no.
It's from a guy called Adam Curtis, who's kind of got connections with Bristol, actually. A Massive Attack. He's from the same kind of, he's part of that kind of world, very much so. And he's a documentary, not really documentaries. I don't know what they are really. I mean, they're films which mix documentary and other kinds of approaches, but they have a weirdly unsettling approach to describing how we've got to where we are in terms of contemporary society by leaping all over the place from the wife of Chairman Mao to somebody who worked for Rackman, the property developer, through to, and all of a sudden nothing seems to make very much sense at all. And then all of a sudden, as the documentaries go on, things kind of clunk into place all of a sudden. You suddenly think, oh shit, I see what he means there, actually. And they're fascinating, and they really haunt you, actually, for days after. So yeah, that's a great thing. Been watching that, and also the fantastic film called Nomadland as well, which is a new film that's just come out, and it's about people who live in. It's a drama about people who live in vans in the States. I mean, a lot of people have started not living in houses, but just driving around, or trailers, but basically live out of vans. And it's a fascinating film. It's not properly released here. I managed to get a copy from my American friend. We watched it online together. It's coming out, I think, in the next week or so over here. Really interesting film. Gonna win massive awards, I think. Definitely recommend it.
Mm-hmm. It's there was a great that Simon Reeve, the guy who does the travel programs on the BBC, when he did that, the Americas, and I watched it in one of my classes at school. We're looking at Alaska and things like that. There's a great one when he's down in Los Angeles and he's interviewing people who are living in bridges, in concrete, in the cavities of concrete bridges, and people who've lost their homes from the global recession, and also looking at like the crumbling infrastructure of Los Angeles and things like that, and all of this 1950s concrete work, which is on the point of crumbling, and including dams and freeway bridges and things like that. Just fascinating sort of insight into where America's at the moment. It's just incredible.
Unfortunately, I think it's where we might be heading, actually, as well.
Yeah. What have I got? I don't know if I can find it now. Everything keeps moving around. Oh, there it is. I've been watching this again, and the Straight Story, the David Lynch film about the guy on his tractor. He goes to visit his sick brother. Oh yeah. I've got that up there as what a wonderful soundtrack that is, and that's part of what I mean. The story's quite sentimental and quite sweet in places and quite emotional, but the reason I like watching this is because of the sweeping shots of the cornfields and the waving corn, and it really reminds me of where I grew up, and in the northeast of Wiltshire on the Oxford and Gloucestershire border, and that's where my parents still are. I've not been able to go back there since last August because I couldn't. My parents are elderly, and with teaching in a big school in the valley, so my wife's a teacher as well. My son's at school. The exposure was just too much of a risk, so I said to my mum and dad, "Let's wait until you're vaccinated, and then we'll be able to see each other." But I watch this for a little bit of escapism, really, because I just love those overhead shots of the corn silos and things like that. You know, so that's what I've been watching. And my wife, who's a big watcher of Netflix and things like that, she's got me watching Homeland at the moment. So I'm slowly working my way through Homeland and getting more and more freaked out by the technology the CIA have got.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. It'd be great for urban studies for me for a field trip. If I could just borrow one of their drones for a day.
I bought a drone. I love the quote on the back of the soundtrack for Straight Story from David Lynch. He says, "Tenderness can be just as abstract as insanity," says, which I think is brilliant, actually. I mean, people always assume that kind of, you know, complexity comes from things that are kind of negative. But the idea that you know, tenderness can be kind of interesting and complex, fantastic idea, I think, actually. Yeah, I listen to this about once a week and watch the film about once every couple of months as well. So.
Yeah, I've never watched it. I'm going to watch it now.
Yeah. What was I going to say as well? I also like any stories about men who go long distances on tractors. I've always found that quite interesting. There's the was it George Jones who was it Tammy Wynette? Were they married or one time? I can't remember. Anyway, did she throw his keys in the pond or something? So he just went to his garage and drove his tractor to the pub, or his lawnmower to the pub or something.
It was his lawnmower. It wasn't his tractor.
That's it. His lawnmower. Yeah.
We better check out, didn't we?
I feel we should draw the video to a close, folks,
Yeah.
and say thank you so much to Steve for being such a great guest and such fascinating conversations as ever. And again, you know, one of the positive things that's come out of this time is this opportunity to connect with people from all over the world, actually, and just share our passion. So thank you so much, Steve.
Oh, thank you. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Oh, great.
I was in the garden earlier and said to my wife, "It's only 2 hours. I better get upstairs now."
Right, I'm going to stop it. See you, folks.
See you, folks.